You're okay. I think you.
This meeting is being recorded.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 5th session of Ebola Preparedness series. The topic today is on infection prevention control. What basically the things that we will address is what is PPE, donning, doffing, and other IPC measures. I'm sure COVID has played a critical role in teaching us on how to do most of the activities, so it would be like a refresher course. Our speaker today is Dr. Iringu Kamau, who's the DDMS, the Head Division of Patients and Workers Safety National, IPC, in the Ministry of Health. And my name is Mina Gulid. I work in Kenyatta as the Head of Clinical Outreaches and UHC in AID department. For the other sessions, you will always get them on our KNH Research YouTube channel. And for updates, you can also follow us on our KNH Research Twitter handle to keep us updated on what's happening in the scientific world in Kenyatta. So thank you, Daktari, for honoring the visit, the talk today. And we can't wait to learn more from you.
Thank you so much.
You can share the screen. Yeah.
Kindly confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can confirm.
Thank you so much. And most welcome everyone to on this session on infection prevention and control. Just a minute. Yes, I'm the head which is charged with microbial resistance as well as the patient health. So today I will basically more or less give an overview on infection prevention and control, because as most of you are aware, this is a fairly wide they cannot be covered within 1.5 key highlights that we need to know about IPC. And but most important, there's no Ebola IPC who remain the same. But of course, there are some salient aspects related to a specific condition that we will highlight as we proceed with the presentation. Also, forgive my background. There might be some background noise. I'm presenting from home, and there's a lot of.
There's actually no background, but your connectivity.
Quite some background noise.
Yeah.
So maybe, but I believe we'll be able to.
Sorry, Dr. Ringu, I don't know if you can hear me. Hello? Dr. Ringu?
Sorry for that. I was changing my connection. I guess now I'm audible.
Yeah, much more audible.
Yeah, thank you.
We're not actually getting a background noise. We're getting the connectivity was what was a bit off. Yeah.
So fine. Okay. So let's proceed. So as I said, we are going to discuss on infection prevention and control, and we'll basically define infection prevention and control. describe what we call the chain of infection, and then outline the standard as well as the additional precautions. And at the end of it all, we'll outline a few aspects of EVD specific IPC. So IPC is basically a scientifically based action that aims at or which refers to policies and procedures which are utilized to minimize the risk of transmission of infection, especially in healthcare facilities. And the whole aim is to protect the patient, who is our main client, us as health workers, as well as any visitors or other persons whom we might interact with within our healthcare setup. And we are aware that for infections to occur, there is what we call a chain. We need an infectious agent. For example, in the case of Ebola virus, we have the virus. We need a reservoir where that Ebola or that agent can reside. And in the case of Ebola, for example, it's us as human beings, we are main form of reservoir. Port of exit, how does that virus or bacteria or any other causative agent leave our body so that it can reach the other person? That is what we call the port of exit. And for AVD, we know in any form of secretion from parts of the body, mode of transmission, then how then is this agent, once it exits the reservoir, how does it reach the other person? We know we have air, like for COVID, we are talking a lot of airborne, droplet transmission, and in some aspects, airborne transmission. We know for EVD, it's more of contact. There need to be a direct contact between you with the infected person or secretion from that infected person. Then how does that, once it has been transmitted, how else then does it enter into the other person? Is it through mucous membrane? Like for COVID, we knew it was through the respiratory tract. But for EVD, we know it is through mucous membranes, as well as in some situations, intact skin. Then there's the aspect of the susceptible host. What makes you as a host more prone to develop the infection than another person? Is it an aspect of, are you immunosuppressed? Do you have a comorbidity? Do you have other underlying conditions that make you more susceptible? Are you at the extremes of age? So all of these are key factors that come into play when we think about the chain of transmission. And basically the whole aim of IPC is to break this chain. That if the infectious agent is there, how do we ensure that it does not reach the reservoir? How do we make sure that it does not leave the reservoir and reach the susceptible host? So this is basically what IPC entails. And to achieve this, we apply what we call both standard precautions as well as additional precautions. And the bigger part of this presentation is going to dwell on standard precautions as well as additional precautions. So when it comes to standard precautions, we say that these are basically the minimum measures that we take in our practice to reduce the risk of transmission of pathogens from a recognized or an unrecognized source in healthcare facilities. And we call them standard because they apply to all patients all the time, irrespective of what condition the patient has, they apply at all times. And which are they? I've listed them here. We have hand hygiene. It does not matter whether you have Ebola or COVID. Hand hygiene is a standard practice in our healthcare facilities. Respiratory hygiene, use of PPE, safe injection practices, handling of equipment, cleaning and disinfection, environmental cleaning, handling of linen, as well as waste management. So all these have to apply irrespective of what conditions you are dealing with, and that's why we call them standard precautions. And we'll briefly go through a few of them so that we are able to understand exactly what we are talking about. So So let's start with hand hygiene. At the hands of a healthcare worker, they are known to be the commonest form through which a bug is transmitted from one person to another. And therefore, hand hygiene becomes the best way to prevent spread of microorganisms within healthcare settings. And beyond pandemics, it also helps prevent other healthcare-associated infections which are prevalent within our healthcare settings. And so when you perform hand hygiene, you protect yourself, you protect your other health workers, as well as your patients that you may have. And we know that there are two main methods of hand hygiene. That is the routine cleaning with the soap and running water. And we recommend use of liquid soap for reasons that we may discuss in other settings. And there's also an aspect of time. How long do you perform the hand hygiene? We recommend 40 to 60 seconds, following steps which I know we've seen posters all around of how to perform hand hygiene. Then you have the disinfection of your hand with the, mostly we use the alcohol-based hand rub, and this should last 20 to 30 seconds. Again, using procedures that I know all of us are aware of. Of importance to know is that we recommend for hand washing or cleaning when your hands are visibly soiled, but if they are not, then you can perform a hand rub. But again, you'll notice that as you perform hand rub more frequently, you start getting maybe crust of the alcohol-based hand rub, and you might be required to perform hand hygiene, hand washing at some point. So, and then why do we need to clean our hands? As we say, they are our main tool of work as health workers, and they are basically the link between our environment and our patient, between our environment and the instruments we use. We have our cell phones, so we have to ensure that if your hands are clean, then you not transmit any microorganisms to either the environment or to your equipment or to the patient or the patient's environment. And to perform hand hygiene, we recommend that we follow what we call the WHO's 5 movements of hand hygiene. And these 5 movements apply to any setting where healthcare involves direct contact with patients. And the 5 key movements is before contact with any patient, before you touch a patient, for any reason, you need to perform hand hygiene. And this one, you are protecting the patient. Before clean or aseptic procedure, if you are inserting a line, if you are cleaning a wound, if you are performing dressing, you need to perform hand hygiene, again, to protect the patient. Then there are those patients now that also now protect you after touching the patient. You don't know what you have come into contact with, so always perform hand hygiene after touching patient surroundings or after a risk of exposure to body fluids. Maybe you are changing a urine bag, you are changing an IV line, or you are fixing a line and there's a risk that some splashes of blood could have occurred. There's need to perform hand hygiene so that you protect yourselves. So we have the 3 movements that protect you, and you have the 2 movements that protect the patient. So that's basically on hand hygiene. Quickly, I'll talk about respiratory hygiene. It's important in our environment, and because good respiratory etiquette can reduce spread of microorganisms, basically that cause respiratory infections, such as colds and influenza. And I'm sure we are aware that currently there's an ongoing flu outbreak, and there's need to be able to protect each other. And this became very, very crucial during the time of COVID-19. And there are various techniques like turning your head away when coughing or sneezing, covering your nose and mouth, discarding any tissues that may be used, coughing or sneezing into your sleeve, cleaning your hand with soap and water after you come to contact with any respiratory secretion. And so it is therefore important to promote respiratory hygiene, even to the patients, especially those who may have respiratory symptoms. And this becomes important in terms of EVD because the respiratory secretions can also be shown that they might also transmit the EVD. So it's important that patients who might have respiratory symptoms be provided with a mask and be kept at least a meter away from other patients and have visual aids, around the triage or the screening area so that guide on respiratory etiquette, as well as having masks and tissues for patients who are in all areas. Now, the next standard precaution is the personal protective equipment. This is a very wide topic and a very contentious topic. But what is PPE? It's basically specialized clothing or equipment that a healthcare worker dons. It can also be done by a patient or visitors, and it basically creates a barrier between the potential infectious material and the port of entry, such as the eyes, nose, mouth, or even skin. So it refers, and so PPE basically refers to any one piece of protective clothing. But of importance that PPE does not eliminate infection, but it reduces the risk of acquiring or transmitting infection. And who need to wear PPE? Basically, all healthcare personnel should wear PPE. And this becomes important, the next statement, that either paid or unpaid who are working in healthcare settings, because we tend to forget, especially the support staff who are working in our healthcare settings, and we tend to focus our provision of PPE to what we call the formal healthcare worker. So any person working within a healthcare setting should be provided for with PPE. And also family members or visitors who participate in patient care, and especially in this type of VVD, those members, visitors, or family members should also be provided with personal protective equipment, so that they also become protected from the patient who may be unwell. And there are so many types of PPE in the healthcare settings, ranging from the head covers, eye protection, gowns, coverall, aprons, gloves, and boots. So the choice now will be dependent on what you are dealing with, and we'll talk about that shortly. So when it comes to PPE, there are some key principles that need to be applied. That in as much as you believe you are protecting yourself, always perform hand hygiene before and after wearing PPE. PPE should be available where and when indicated, and they should be in correct size. I'm sure those of you might have done PPE and you don't a wrong PPE, even a glove. If you wear a very small glove, it risks tearing out. If you wear a very large glove, it risks coming off during a procedure. So you need to have the correct size of PPE. The second bullet is very important, that PPE should be selected according to the risk of transmission. I remember during COVID, everybody was asking for a 95 mask or a coverall. But if you ask the reason why we're asking for that, it's just to protect ourselves. But the choice of PPE is dependent on what you call, like you do a risk assessment. You ask myself, is my face at risk when I'm interacting with this patient? If yes, then you need to protect your face. Are my hands at risk? If you touch a patient or a secretion from a patient and you say, yes, my hands are at risk, yes, then I need what? I need to protect my hands with gloves, for example. Are my clothes at risk, or is my body at risk? If yes, then you go ahead and choose either a gown or a coverall, depending on the level of the exposure. So PPE choice should be based on what we call a risk assessment, and the details of the risk assessment is available if need be. Then always put PPE on before contact with the patient, and always remove immediately after completing the task. Never reuse disposable PPE. Then clean and disinfect reusable PPE between each use. We are aware, like we have things like, for example, goggles and face shields. Sometimes they can be reused, and so there's need to clean and disinfect them after using them. If PPE become contaminated or damaged, never proceed with the procedure. Remove that item and change. They should not be adjusted during patient care. I've seen people adjusting goggles or adjusting face masks during a procedure, and that's very dangerous, especially when you're dealing with a highly infectious agent like EBD. And then you have specific things like not touching your face. If you have concern of a breach in any PPE, you need to leave the patient area and change your PPE, and always remove carefully to avoid self-contamination. I tell people that we have a lot of steps on donning and doffing. I don't worry about donning. You are donning PPE in a safe area, but where healthcare workers become infected is during the removal of PPE. And so we need to be very stringent in terms of the steps and care and procedure of how we remove PPE. I might not be able to go through the process of doffing at this point, but I'm aware that this information is readily available. Effectiveness of PPE depends on, one, a regular and an adequate supply of PPE in appropriate sizes. And this is a message to managers of facilities, that for you to make sure that your health workers are well protected, you need to have a regular supply of PPE. Again, as an IPC, no precaution is an act alone. You might have the best PPE in the book or good qualities, but what about things like hand hygiene? So effective PPE use must be accompanied by good hygiene practices, training and monitoring of staff. The staff need to be trained on how to don and off PPE, adhering to protocols of wearing PPE, as well as a supervisor or policies on supervision on donning and doping of PPE. So those are just a few highlights on PPE. When it comes to injection safety, remember EVD is more or less, we talked of transmitted through secretions, and blood is one of them. And therefore, we need to really enhance in terms of injection safety. And we are aware of all the sharps that we can come across in our healthcare safety. And there is need to actually ensure injection safety, not just because of EVD. We are aware of other risks like hepatitis, for example. There's a 30% risk of acquiring hepatitis B if the right safe injection procedures are not followed. And again, remember, everyone is at risk of being injured and acquiring an infection during when unsafe practices are followed. From the patients to healthcare workers, to even children in the community, for example. If you discard off your sharps poorly, then you are risking those people who are around your healthcare setting. So we need to protect each and every other person. And these are a few principles of handling sharp objects. Do not detach, and we know that. Do not recap needles. Do not leave needles on the vial. Do not break or bend needles. Never put your hands in sharp containers. Never force sharp objects into the containers. The issue of ensuring that your sharp container, you always go up to 3/4 full. Never overfill our sharp boxes. These are things we know, and we are just reminding ourselves. And then the need to always ensure that we incinerate our sharp box. But trust me, you go to some facility, you'll get the red circle there, you'll get needles lying all over, sharps lying all over, posing a danger both to healthcare workers as well as visitors and other people. Another key aspect or standard practice is waste management. And I know this has been a challenge in many facilities. And I think, actually waste management is one of the indicators that we are using currently to monitor IPC in our healthcare facilities. And poor waste management can lead to potential risk to people's health and the environment. And therefore, healthcare facilities should have a responsibility to properly manage the waste that they produce. That's the broader message. So when we say waste management, what are we saying? Now, we are aware that in healthcare facilities, we have two main categories of waste. We have the general waste, which forms the bigger bulk of about 85%. Then we have the hazardous waste. This is both from the sharp, infectious waste, pathological waste, chemical waste, pharmaceutical remnants, as well as radioactive waste. But remember, despite this being the smaller portion, that is the hazardous waste being the smaller portion, it poses the biggest risk to us as health workers as well as to our patients. And so when we talk about waste management, it's a process that starts from minimizing waste. How do you reduce the amount of waste that you produce? Then it goes to the second box, which is where we have the biggest problem in our healthcare facilities, segregating waste. We have our beans, we have our red bean, we have our yellow bean where they apply, we have our black beans, but you go and have a look, you'll see all sorts of waste, very, very poorly segregated. And currently we are using what we are calling the waste segregation index to determine how well are you managing your waste. Then of course we have the issues of collecting the waste, transporting, sorting, treating, and finally disposing. Waste disposal is another challenge we're having in most of our facilities, because as we are aware, we recommend to have an incinerator, but you find that in most of our facilities we don't have incinerator. So how do we dispose of our waste at the end of the day? So beyond minimizing, collecting, transporting, we need to ensure that we are segregating our waste well and we are disposing our waste well. So because of poor challenges in disposal, we end up storing our waste in our healthcare facilities. So how do we store the waste? What are the recommendations? Because the recommendation that if you are to store waste, it should not be stored for more than 24 hours. And if it is stored, it should be in a well-secured area that is protected from extremes of weather. For example, rain is protected from predators. And predators can even be human beings. Can be chokoras, they can be cats, they can be dogs. So, and they can carry infectious waste if it's not well stored, and then you find the same waste in the community. But of importance for EVD, especially in the Ebola treatment unit, you see that all waste generated in an ETU should be considered hazardous or infectious waste and should be managed as such. So that's the key message in as far as EVD is concerned. So I'm sure we are aware of this form of segregation. Nowadays, we are talking of three main forms: the general waste, the infectious waste, as well as the sharp waste. The next standard precaution is on decontamination of surfaces, materials, and equipment. I know we are aware of this, but we just need to understand a few concepts. Cleaning, any process of what we call decontamination starts with cleaning. It basically involves a method that removes foreign materials such as dust or soil from our equipment or environment, as well as also remove organic material such as blood and blood secretion. So cleaning is always the first step. Then it's followed by disinfection. And this disinfection basically either uses chemicals or heat or other forms that the aim is to reduce the number of viable microorganisms. Of importance is that disinfection is able to inactivate most of the organic matter, but does not inactivate bacterial spores, prions, and some viruses. Then when it comes to sterilization, which is basically a process that basically renders object free from all forms of microorganisms, including spores, but not prions. Usually, some prions are not removed by sterilization. Although in Kenya, we don't have a very big challenge of prion-related infections, but we need to be keen that they may happen. So what is decontamination? I know the word decontamination has been used right, left, and center. Basically, decontamination is the whole process that renders equipment or surfaces safe for use. So it involves cleaning, then after cleaning, followed by disinfection or sterilization. So the whole of that process is what we call decontamination. And we need to be keen on that. But because some people say decontamination matter, we decontaminate using jigs, or so decontamination is the whole process. So I want to skip this because we've talked about cleaning, but maybe what I just want to say that cleaning utilizes water and a detergent. And the detergent we're talking about is, we can use our normal detergent, our soap, or for example, our soaps, or we have what we call the enzymatic detergent. And I know in some setups, the use of enzymatic detergents have not been very, very clear, but I know with time it's getting clear. So enzymatic detergent basically acts like any other soap, only that it has some enzymes which are able to digest any form of inorganic material. Another key thing for cleaning that this requires a rubbing action or some form of friction. So when you are cleaning, ensure that you either depending on what you are using, some form of friction has to apply. The same as applied to when you are performing hand hygiene. The friction of our hands or the rubbing of our hands helps to dislodge of any material that might be on the surface or we are cleaning. So we talked about disinfection. There are so many chemicals that we can use for disinfection. I'm aware, I know we are aware of the chlorine, which is the most commonly used disinfectant. But let's remember we have others like alcohol, formaldehyde, OPA, salicylic acid, and many others. Then sterilization, I think we defined that. We don't have to go back there. But what are the few principles of cleaning and disinfection? If you are cleaning, you always proceed from high to low areas. If you are cleaning a room, start from the higher levels to lower areas. Proceed from clean to dirty areas. Make sure to clean or disinfect patient care equipment between each patient. Don't especially if you're using like a BP cup, don't remove a BP cup from one patient to the next. Always try to clean where possible. Choose of using one bucket for one task. Isolation cleaning product should be stored and used only in isolation areas. This is specific for EBD. If you have your ETU, the materials that are used to clean the ETU should remain there. They should not be used in the general setup or in the general area. And these are few, because we use a lot of chlorine. It's just showing the concentration we use. And of importance to note on chlorine is that don't just dip an item in chlorine for this. There's what we call the contact time. And if you notice, the lower the concentration, the higher the contact time. For example, if you are cleaning a surface with 0.5%, then you need to ensure a contact time of at least 10 minutes. If you're using a lower concentration like 0.05%, then you use a longer contact time. But if you notice there's no bigger difference between routine use of chlorine and use of chlorine in Ebola. So there's no major difference in terms of the concentrations and contact times that are recommended. So those are a few of the standard precautions. I've not talked about linen, but I've highlighted the key ones that I feel that you need to know. Then we have what we call the transmission-based precautions. What are they? These are a set of precautions which are based on the specific mode of transmission of an infectious disease. And this is where now, when we come to pandemic, we now tend to also focus on. But of importance that they are meant to complement standard precautions, not to replace, but to complement. Your hand hygiene has to be right, your waste management has to be right, your cleaning and disinfection has to be right before now you opt to on a method or on a standard, or before you opt for an additional precaution. So when are they applied? They apply for patients who are suspected or confirmed to have an infection with a highly transmissible pathogen like EBD, or we also applying during the time of COVID-19. When the pathogen is considered to be epidemiologically important, when medical interventions increase the risk of transmission of a specific infectious agent. And a very good example for bullet series when you are talking in COVID, we are saying, for example, if you are doing an aerosol generating procedure, then we are recommending for you to use a respirator, for example. This is what bullet series is talking about. And when the clinical situation prevents the systematic application of standard precaution. So this just is telling us that the transmission-based precautions, they supplement standard precaution. So, and what activities, what are the activities? Number one, there's the need of a specific PPE, and we'll see that. When you talk of a type of additional precaution, there's the specific PPE that is recommended. There's the role of isolation. There's the role of signage or posters to identify that precaution. There's the role of having dedicated materials or equipment for use for that patient. There's the role of having a dedicated mode of patient transport or movement as well as communication. I may not be able to go into the details of all those, but we'll highlight the few that we can. So which are these transmission-based precautions? There are three main categories. You have the contact. So contact apply to those diseases that we know are transmitted through contact, either direct contact with the patient or indirectly through a product or secretion from a patient. For example, Ebola virus, we have Lassa fever. We have things like E. coli, the common things that we have, cholera, for example. Then we have the droplets. A good example was the COVID-19 that we came through. Then we have the airborne precautions, and a good example is TB and measles. But you require that some infections may require a combination of these categories, and you never avoid. For example, when you're dealing with an EVD patient, you'll apply contact precautions and sometimes droplet precautions, and you'll see why. That's why sometimes we don't mask or a respirator. You can combine contact and airborne, contact and droplet, depending on the risk that you are faced with. So then I will talk about some few specific IPC measures which are related to EVD. And I know during the time of the case management presentation, the issue of screening and triage was highlighted. I think to me, in any IPC intervention, screening and triage forms a basis, the first step that you apply in infection prevention. Because what is screening? Screening, you are basically having a mass of people coming to your facility, and you are applying some technique, a few questions or a few observations to be able to pick those who you think may have the disease that you suspect. That's basically screening. So you pick them and remove them from the bigger population. That's the first step to ensure that the infection is not spread to the health facility. And we insist that screening should be at the first contact with the patient, irrespective of the level of care. Always have that, what do we call it? We call it index of suspicion on patients. Like now, I know we are having the clinical criteria depending on the symptoms and the epidemiological criteria. Like, have you traveled from Uganda or so? For COVID, I remember this happened, but at some point, the epidemiological criteria changed, because once the disease landed with us, the question of whether you had traveled from China became irrelevant. So then you need to apply all other measures to be able to pick those patients whom you think may have the infection. That is what is screening. Then after that, then you need to triage. For those whom you are suspected or confirmed, then you need to prioritize them in terms of depending on how severe the conditions are. They have a comorbidity so that you can attend to them easily. So screening and triage is a very, very important aspect, and it should be applied. And when we have done our surveys, I think these are the poorest done, or sometimes it's left with very unqualified people. I know we saw in our healthcare facility whereby you could get a soldier or a guard is the one taking temperatures, and you are calling that screening. So ideally, we are recommending that we need to have a tent at the gate, and everyone is screened at the end, irrespective of their status. They are screened, and those who are found to be confirmed or suspected are then pushed on for triaging, where they are assessed and then they are managed accordingly. So that's one aspect that I need to highlight on. And that's why I said everyone needs to be screened. So how do we prevent infection of healthcare providers and patients? This is another important thing, because healthcare workers are at a very, very big risk of getting infected when pandemics come. So you need to identify and isolate suspected Ebola cases in your facility. You need to have the right screening and the right triage. Then you need to protect yourself as a health worker and the patient. How? Following all the standard precautions we talked about, staying at least a meter away from patients, keeping patients at least a meter from each other. And then the last bullet, do not do procedures unless necessary and do them safely. Your safety always comes first. Then, of course, the issue of ensuring proper environmental cleaning, disinfection, and waste management. And this has to apply when it comes to EVD. So we have talked of the screening and triaging area. Then there's the issue of the isolation zone. We may not go into the details of this, but we have indicated that each facility should have an isolation zone. It does not have to be a new building or a newly constructed building. You can just identify one unit, and then we have given guidance of how an isolation zone should look like. So you should be able to differentiate in your healthcare facility, which is our isolation area and which is the general area for care. And then you follow the protocols as guided, as we have guided. And this is just a good example of how you can prepare your health facility. So, and we have what we call the red zone, where you have the areas that are coming into contact with the EVD patient, and the green zone, mostly the green zone. So I'll not focus so much on this. I'll be able to share the detailed slides on this at the end of this presentation. But there's a need to be able to demarcate, because the other biggest problem we have is that, yes, we have an isolation area, but traffic flow is so disorganized that we end up infecting each and every place that we pass. There should be a clear direction. If a patient enters through point A, they exit through point B. If health workers enter through point A, they exit through point B, and not vice versa. Then the other issue is the issues of PPE for EVD patients. When I started, I said that the choice of PPE is dependent on the risk. If you are at the triage, please don't go asking for a coverall. If you are the one doing screening, don't go asking for N95. So we have identified what we are calling PPE for routine care of EVD patients. So you need to protect your hair, you need to protect your face with a mask. You just need a kawaida gown, as long as it's a waterproof gown. Then you make sure that your eyes are protected, and then you protect your hands with at least 2 pairs of gloves, and then boots. But again, you might even find you don't need all this. It does not, even if you are living with an EVD patient, and you can be able to maintain at least 2 meters, and you just want to ask the patient, how was your night? Then you might not necessarily need PPE. So the choice of the PPE will be dependent on the risk that exists. But then we have the PPE that is now for those who are working inside what we call the red zone. And these are the ones we are recommending that they get the full protection with the coverall, starting from the head with the head cover, with goggles to ensure that basically no skin is left exposed, then a coverall, an apron, as well as the gloves and foot protection. So that is currently the kind of recommendation you need to choose to decide to be able to determine where am I working and what is the level of interaction am I having with my patient, so that you choose on the right PPE. So that's the end of my presentation. I know it's so summarized, but I've tried to at least speak on each of the key areas of IPC. And so thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you so much for that precise presentation. It was quite, to the point and detailed as well. So please put your questions on the Q&A area. We are happy to engage with you with any questions for Dr. Irungio Kamau on his presentation on IPC. Those for me, while I wait for people to post questions, I found it interesting how you said how healthcare workers respond to pandemic. Elaborate. How do they normally respond when it comes to? We've only had one pandemic, I think, in the last 100 years, and probably it's more on epidemics response of healthcare workers. what is the literature saying, or what is your experience on that?
Thank you for that question. I think that this is something that has come up, and I think in response to pandemics or epidemics, I think we start from a point where we know very little about the infectious agent, from its biology to the mode of transmission to the pathology, how severe or how severe will the disease be. So we start off from a point of fear, and from a point of fear, then we end up with, number one, making so many mistakes. Number one, we end up maybe having the wrong choice of protective measures, wrong choice of PPE, for example. And we saw it with COVID. When we started responding to COVID, we started at a very high level. And this has an impact in terms of even to the economy, because, for example, for COVID, for example, I know we spent so much initially purchasing N95 for every healthcare worker, purchasing coverall for every healthcare worker, and that deviates funds or resources from other needs. So to me, that's the biggest challenge we have. Then we start from a point again of not knowing of how to do not do. So when you're removing those PPE, then you also tend to get infected. So out of lack of knowledge, you also get a lot of healthcare workers getting infected also. But I think again, this boils down to our preparedness as a people or as a nation. Because and I'm liking the way we are responding to EVD now, because at least we're exposed to COVID. We are responding from a point of some knowledge of what do we need. So I think that's what I can say, that sometimes when pandemics or epidemics occur, at the outset of a response, so many mistakes happen, so many unnecessary things are purchased or bought, and even healthcare workers also get infected because of ignorance or lack of information about the particular infection. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So Michael is asking, is there a health coverage insurance for front health workers in case of exposure to EVD or other infectious diseases in line with the national level?
Okay, I know that's a question that is somehow beyond infection, beyond IPC. But again, it's the right question at the right time. I think 2 months ago, our division finalized on a policy on patient and health worker safety. And actually, we finalized on a policy and an action plan, and it was launched, both were launched during the World Patient Safety Day. And during the development of the policy and the action plan, we involved the divisions of occupational health at the Ministry of Health, as well as the Directorate of Occupational Health Services at the Ministry of Labor. And that question came up. And actually, yes, the Directorate of Occupational Health at the Ministry of Labor has a very, very clear guideline on compensation of health workers. The biggest problem has been that we have lacked, as a health workforce, a system of reporting incidents. Because incidents are meant to be reported from when they occur, and actually there's a cascade. And in our current policy, we have outlined that cascade. Unfortunately, we just finalized on it, and now we are just panel beating before we disseminate very soon. But yes, there's room for compensation. And currently, NHIF is the one that is compensating for people or health workers who get infected during pandemic. So yes, it is there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Another person is asking, Peter is asking, what is the IPC supervisor responsibility in the case of in the case of probably Ebola or something? Is it patients, caretakers, or staff? What is their responsibility? Who are they responsible over? I think that's the question he's trying to ask. Over to you.
I think I'm seeing the question. What are the IPC supervisors in this case? Because they are patients, because there are patients, caretakers, and health workers. Okay, the question is not very clear.
He had it 2 times, so that's why I was
Yes,
for you. He
yes.
had
I don't know
so is that more or less
what are
what
the
is the responsibility of the IPC supervisor in the, because there's
okay.
patient caretakers and healthcare workers. What's the responsibility?
Thank you so much. I know in our national IPC guideline, we have clearly outlined the rules of what we call the IPC governance. And the IPC governance starts from the national level to the county, where we are meant to have a county IPC team. Then it's all the way to the facility, where we are meant to have the facility IPC team. And these teams, we have clearly defined their roles and responsibilities. And the role of the IPC supervisor, if I may use that word for now, but we call them the IPC focal person in a facility, is to ensure that IPC procedures are followed, ensure that IPC supplies are availed to the facility. That's basically their role. So ensure that we have some IPC supplies and ensure IPC practices are adhered to, as well as monitor and evaluate those practices. A simple and a very well clear-cut role. But the biggest problem we have had or we have currently is that we are lacking in some facilities what I may call appointed IPC focal people. So that today you'll go and find person A is the IPC focal person, but when you go 2 weeks later, there's a different person. So in our national guideline, we are recommending for appointment of IPC focal people, someone who is there full-time. And it's happening. Kenyatta, I know we have full-time IPC team, and the IPC work is doing very well. I know Madare Hospital, despite it being a mental hospital, we have a full-time IPC team with a focal person. We want this to be replicated in other facilities. Because their roles are very well clearly cut out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I couldn't summarize it better. Another question is on handling bodies. So how are we supposed to, what level of PPE are we supposed to handle bodies?
Thank you for that question. I had hoped that during this webinar, you should have slotted in the forensic team, because we have a team in EVD response that is handling safe handling of human remains after EVD. I don't know if they are slotted in for a presentation anytime soon, but I think I've been part of that team, contributing to the IPC. But the recommendation is very, very simple. We are dealing with a body, and we have said EVD is transmitted via contact. So basically, what we are recommending is contact precautions. Contact precautions mean, one, do not handle the body. No handling of the body. That's number one. I know there are issues of washing the body, handling the body, kissing the body, all those kind of things. So number one is no handling the body. Beyond the body, then there's also the issue of ensuring that secretions, the body is, all the orifices are plugged to ensure that no secretions fall out, so that they can and they come into contact with the environment. That's number two. Number three, for the person handling the body, we are recommending that they have to have a full don PPE. I know it's extreme, because this body is not moving, it's not coughing, it's not talking, But if we enhance contact precaution, ensure we perform our hand hygiene, we have our gloves on, we have our gowns on, then the body can easily be handled. But I know the forensic team has produced the clear guidelines, and I believe it will be shared out very soon. I might not be privy to the whole detail, but just note, how would you get infected by that body? It's by a contact. So put in contact precaution and you are safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rungu, for the insightful presentation from Florence. And what's your take on donning and doffing body monitoring?
Pardon? I didn't get that question right.
What is your take on donning and doffing body monitoring? You know, when you have somebody monitoring how you're donning and doffing.
Thank you so much for that question. Yes, the body system has been recommended by CDC, by WHO, especially when you are dealing with this very highly infectious condition. And the role of the body is to observe you as you don, and they are meant to have a checklist, because we have a procedure of donning, for example. So they have a checklist. Put on gloves. They check a tick box, and they ensure that you are putting on the gloves in the right manner. The same way, when you are doffing PPE, they also observe you and guide you in terms of the steps to follow. So yes, a body system is highly recommended where we are dealing with very, very highly infectious diseases, because you don't want to make any mistake. So I would rather have someone observing you. But note, where there's no body system, nowadays we're even recommending a mirror, a big mirror at the back and front of the health worker, so that you are also seeing what you are doing. So you can either have the body as a different person, or a mirror whereby you can look and as you doff, you are observing. If you are putting on, and for example, you're putting on a coverall, I know the area around the neck sometimes becomes very hard to see if it's well sealed. But if you have a mirror in front of you, can be able to look. So yes, it's a recommended system.
Yeah, so you can even use a mirror if you don't have a bad, Florence. Frederick is asking. Frederick is making a comment. I'm sorry. I think I'm getting a lot of. It's hard to keep track. No. So I'll just jump to the other question because I can't trace the other one. Good afternoon. What is the national policy on waste treatment to health facilities? You'll find that most of our health facilities lack waste treatment facilities like incinerator, and they end up doing ordinary and open burning of wastes, and a number of filled up safety boxes lying in our facilities, and you are stuck on how to handle them. Kindly advise.
Yeah, actually, waste management has been a very big thorn in the flesh. But I've liked what the question says, that you find filled up safety boxes. Let me start there. That's a behavioral issue.
Mm-hmm.
Filled up safety boxes or filled up waste bins or poorly segregated waste, that's a behavioral problem. It's not a national problem, and it's not accountable, or a leadership problem. It's a behavioral, it's an attitude problem. And so we need to start there.
Mm-hmm.
When we say don't fill a bin beyond the water, why are you struggling to fill it up? But I know, yes, we're having a challenge in terms of the waste disposal. What do? We might have segregated our waste very well, but how do we dispose of it? So that becomes now a very difficult question for me, because each county is meant to acquire or procure incinerators for their health facilities, and where not possible, they are meant to tender waste management. So I may not have an outright answer for that question, but I know it's a big gap, and I know as a national level, both the IPC unit as well as the environment team, we are trying to push countries to invest in a waste management system in healthcare facilities. Otherwise, you're going to have to end up with a very, very big problem. But what I say is, can you do what you are meant to do? If it's segregating, segregate that waste. Fill the waste as recommended. Then let's now fight that. Let's be left with the fight of how do we dispose. But let's do to our level best up to where we can, as we lobby for issues of disposal and the rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Daktari. So I like how you pointed it out. It's really a behavioral issue more than it's a combination of both. Sorry, and the role of counties. Sorry, I'm having a bit of technical challenges, but I got Frederick's question. IPC in health facilities are not taken serious, but for purposes of reporting and performance evaluation. Gaps identified are not taken into consideration and worked on. What can be done so that this can be taken seriously? There's more to what he's asking, but I don't know for some reason why the computer is refusing for me to finish this question. But I think you got his synergy. So his main issue is what can we do to make IPC more taken more seriously in the various hospitals, because even when you're having a focal person, you'd find they're being taken to another facility and they're the ones who are well trained. How do we find a way of retaining them? Because it's a long-term commitment as opposed to changing them all the time. Over to you, Dr.
Yeah, thank you. Let me admit that has also been one of our biggest hindrances to effectively implementing IPC measures in our facilities at our counties. And the biggest problem has been, let me call it, quote unquote, lack of knowledge or lack of understanding of the value of IPC by our leadership. Both that let me start from the national level to the county level. But I know at the national level we have struggled, and now we are having a buy-in. So at the county level, I know we are still having a big gap in terms of, because someone has to understand the value of something for them to either fund it or support it. And I know as a division coming the next year, our main agenda, I know we have earlier focused so much on training health workers on IPC. And we know that our health workers have the information. But the biggest hindrance to implementing has been the problem with the leadership. So actually coming next year, we are now targeting leadership. And we have identified the initial counties to start off with, where we are going to have your leaders and train them on basics of IPC so that they understand. Because out of that, then they are going to understand when the IPC focal person tells me I need 30 beans, it makes sense why I need that. I need those beans. When someone says we need to have hand hygiene stations, it makes sense. So we are slightly changing our approach, and now we are going to target leadership at least from the county level, and then and I believe that we are going to get more support for IPC. Again, remember, like even at the national level, prior to COVID, the value of the IPC was not very, very clear. But COVID did open people's eyes, and now we are getting a lot of support. And we want to cascade the same to the county level. Thank you.
Thank you. The other question is from Agri. How does WIBA apply to pandemics to healthcare workers?
Pardon, how does WIBA?
WIBA.
WIBA.
Yes. I think it's the issue
WIBA,
of I think
yeah. Thank you. Yeah. WIBA, I know. We know it's what we call the Work Injury Benefit Act, and for those who are in practice, it was very well applying to industry workers who could get injured, and maybe you lose a digit or you lose an arm, and it was very easy to calculate the percentage loss in terms of disability. So WIBA per se has not done it. Actually, when we interacted with the guys from the Ministry of Labor, we found that it could not apply to what we call the occupational infection or occupational. It can apply to an occupational injury. For example, as a health worker, you can fall and get a fracture and get amputated. WIBA will very easily come in because it looks physical at the physical disability. But when it comes to infectious diseases, WIBA fails to apply. But the guys from Ministry of Labor told us that there's a way they're able to calculate the loss resulting from an occupational infection. But it does not use the WIBA figures. Like, for example, if you get TB, it's hard to say what is the percentage. But there's a way where they use medical reports and they are able. I can't remember exactly the calculation, but it was based on your basic salary. There's a way that it's calculated. Yes, so it is doable, but not using the WIBA that we know. Yes, thank you.
Okay. How long does Ebola virus survive in the environment that is the surface from Korea?
I think that question has been asked, but we don't have so far we don't have an outright answer. So let me not lie that there's a definite duration. But me, what I tell people, and then that the same question was being asked during COVID, and I asked people, so if you know it lasts 10 minutes, then what? I think the best thing is to ensure that your surfaces are cleaned.
Yeah.
Your surfaces are cleaned and disinfected, because even so, does it mean if it lasts 10 minutes, then you can lose your guard for 10 minutes? So I think for me, what is important is, can we promptly clean our environment and our surfaces? Because the moment you clean, then you remove that virus from the surface. Yeah, that's how I would answer that question.
And that's a very wise answer, very much appreciated. So how would you, even if it's 10 days, it doesn't matter. Are you not going to clean it for 10 days? So yeah, I agree with you, Dr. Ray. People should just do cleaning when needed and periodically as well. Another question from Rogers is, number one, that was such an insightful presentation. I'd like to get more clarification on new waste management protocol. Are we doing away with the red bin? On surgical instruments, are we starting with the soapy water or jik water during cleaning?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for the question on waste management, I know there are some new waste management guidelines by the Division of Environmental Health at the Ministry of Health, and I know there has been a contention about the issue of the yellow bin. I mean the red bin, but I not commit to answer that question. But I know those guidelines I think they are out for endorsement, and they'll be shared out in due course. But from my own point of view, I think the issues of having a red bin and a yellow bin, to me, it was not making any sense. And those were the recommendations we made, because if it's infectious waste, let it be infectious waste so that it can be incinerated. And again, in terms of also the economic impact of purchasing so many bins. So currently, I know there's a recommend to have the black, the yellow, and the sharp bin. So, but let's await the finalization of the current guidelines, and then we will adapt to what is guided. I think the next question was on if you Doc, you can kindly, it was on kindly remind me the second part of that question. I lost the second part of the question. No one?
Oh, sorry, I'm muted.
Oh,
Second part of the question was on the cleaning of surgical equipment. Do you start with
yes.
water or jig water?
Yeah. Now, I know whatever that person asks is basically what sometimes is happening in our facilities, that we're having jig water, you have your instrument and you dip them in jig. And I'm sure for those who have done that, they know what happens. Chlorine fixes organic matter on surgical equipment. And that's why you find your scissors, your couples, your cup holders rusted, because you dip them in a chlorine solution first. So the recommendation is very clear. You clean, then you sterilize. For equipment, you clean. And you see the role of cleaning is, one, you are removing any organic matter like blood or secretions from that instrument before you expose them to chlorine. And you clean them with water and soap. Soap removes all organic matter, proteins and whatever. Or you use our enzymatic detergent, which basically cleans the instrument. So the idea of cleaning is, when you look at the instrument, it's visibly clean, but not sterile. For instruments, then the next thing, once you clean them, you basically wrap them and take them to your SCSSD. Nowadays, we are not recommending the use of jig on especially the surgical equipment, because once you clean them, what is the point of putting them in jig, then taking them to SSD? It does not add value, wastage. So just clean them with soap and water, let them dry, and then wrap them, put them in whatever containers, and then take them to your CSSD. But for those equipment that need to be disinfected with chlorine, never ever dip them in chlorine water first, because you basically just fix the organic matter, and then within no time your instrument will become of no use. So clean with soap and water or your enzymatic detergent, then you disinfect for those that require disinfection, or you take them for sterilization. And that's what we are calling decontamination, if you remember the way we started the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. So the other question is on incinerator. Does the incinerator destroy the needles completely?
That's a very mechanical engineering question, but I believe it does, because basically the temperature levels, and if you look at the material used to make the nickel melts. Okay, that one I don't want to answer, but I think it does, because we recommend incineration, so it is able to burn that metal and it melts and it becomes ash. Yes. Thank you.
What are the most important actions to prevent infection?
The most important steps to prevent infection
of preventing infection.
Yeah. If you remember what I listed as the standard precautions, you see those are the critical elements of infection prevention and control. And remember, there were hand hygiene, use of PPE, proper waste management, ensuring injection safety, proper linen management, cleaning and disinfection, all the standard precautions. We call them the key. They are like the 10 commandments of infection prevention and control. Above that, we have what we call the additional precautions, like the contact, droplet, and airborne, which will now be dependent on what exact infection are you dealing with. Yes, so 10 commandments is the standard precautions. If you follow those, you are able to manage infection. But most important, above all that, I say behavior change and attitude change. Because how many hand hygiene stations do we have in our facility? But how many people perform hand hygiene? How many wards have all the right waste bins, but we don't segregate our waste? So beyond those standard precautions, there's also a behavioral or an individual aspect of it. Can you comply compliance with those standards. We need to comply to the standards. Thank you.
Okay. I think we've answered majority of the questions, and Dr. unless you have something burning, or you can give us a parting shot for today's episode.
Yeah, I think I'm glad when I see 686 participants in this session. It tells us the kind of need we have for information. But I think my parting shot is this. I know we have the information. Right now, what you are doing, you are just amplifying on what we know. But how is our practice? How is our practice? So my parting shot, let's practice what we learn, and we'll all be safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ari, for today's session. It was quite informative. So next week we have on Tuesday, because Monday is a public holiday, we'll have establishment of ETUs. ETUs I think has to do with Ebola treatment units. For Wednesday, we'll have a session on epidemiological surveillance and contact tracing for Ebola virus. And on the same day, sorry, it's going to be a heavy day, but we're going to have a topic on approach to to a patient with a genetic disorder. This talk is going to be given by Dr. Siokao Ilovi, who is a medical genetist. And truly, we need to hear more about Dr. She enlightened me about GMO this week. So I can't wait to hear more about her next week on how to approach patients with a genetic disorder. And we've had a lot on pediatrics. This time around, it will be on adult patients. So again,
Doc, before you leave,
yeah.
I have a recommendation, kindly, if possible.
Yeah.
If although maybe I also talked to Caroline Miner from on the media, I think we need a presentation on handling of human remains.
It's there. It's
Is it
there.
there? Oh,
Yeah,
it's
it's
there.
there. We just haven't slotted it in.
Thank you.
It will either be on Thursday or Friday. We are also looking at people who have experiences in Uganda in the current epidemic, and maybe we can
Great.
invite some of our listeners, the likes of Joseph Ngeno and Francis. Have been keen on their comments. They seem to have had experience from West Africa. So in the course of next week, we'll have a lot of those discussions. So thank you very much, everybody. As usual, you can find this recording on YouTube channel, and you can follow us on the KNH Research Twitter handle as shown below. Engage with us, give us feedback, and for the CPDs, I know we have a lot of discussions on that. We'll upload a small clip on how to go about it on our YouTube channel. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely weekend and a happy Jamhuri Day as well. Bye-bye. Bye, Nelson.